Thanks, Petra. Will Petteri
Yes.
put the slides? So thanks for inviting me to speak as well. It's actually the first time in years that somebody asks me to do something like this. Have been working with different things for the past few years. I'm Aarne Rajalahti and I'm the property director of the Service Foundation. Same foundation as Petra, Petteri, Heidi, and Kirsi. And before my current role, as now I work with more with housing. We have 1,200 homes for people with intellectual disabilities, and I'm responsible for setting the homes and construction processes. So before this, I was lucky to be one of the persons working with self-directed support in Finland, and we actually were one of the first pilots that did it in Finland, and the first pilot with disability services. There was before one little local project with elderly services, very local, very small, but that was it. So we were happy to start this progress of evolution to maybe more better services and better, more inclusive world for everyone. Let's see. So I'm going to just tell you about the very first few years that I was mainly linking with this progress. Petra mentioned the UNCRPD at her presentation. That's the first one of the main drivers. But when we started this work, we didn't ratify. We haven't ratified the convention yet. But we had a few main drivers that drove us forward. One was that there was a strong DI process had started in Finland, and there were strong plans of deinstitutionalization, and but the options that there were quite box-like, not much innovation going on. So that was one driver. Petra mentioned the public tendering, public procurements that created growing pressure to our field, since it was decided in 2007 that all health and all social services, everything, were put under public procurement if not produced by public sector, meaning the municipalities or joint municipalities that Petra mentioned. And mainly the procurement is by price. And of course we know that it leads very fast to very low prices. We opened the whole care sector to international care business, and the things changed very fast. Before municipalities, the public sector had the strongest take on disability service, for example, and then there were some private and NGOs, quite strong NGOs, but way more smaller than the public sector. Usually it went like that NGOs were more developing things. Then suddenly it was pure competition by everybody. So no room for innovation with that process. There was definitely growing need for more individual solutions. We had service vouchers, which I know is quite familiar system in all over Europe, introduced a few years ago before this process. So we had our self-growing awareness of systems around Europe, and there had been this, for example, in the Netherlands, personal budgets, which is the term there, had been introduced in the 90s already. So we knew that. We knew what was going on in some other countries, in Sweden, but especially we saw the progress in England, and I want to thank Simon Duffy and guys in England who had done work with In Control there. So we got to know the people, and basically that was the start. Next slide, please. So we had a little joint project. It was 4 years, us and another organization, NGO in Finland. We had four persons working. One was doing research. One was mainly responsible for working with persons with disabilities, and then we all were responsible for trying to make it happen. So we basically had to start from scratch. What terms to use, what language to use. We chose the term personal budget, since self-directed support frankly sounds a bit silly in Finland. It's a strange term if you translate it, and we couldn't figure out any better. If I would do it now, I would maybe think again, because the term personal budget really immediately focuses on the actual budget, and we know that that's only one part of the whole thing. So we had to think, what's the Finnish context, how does it fit in all policies, in all our systems, in practices. There wasn't any word in any Finnish law about this system, but there was one small in our disability service law, one little point that said, first it mentioned all the services. We are quite service-based. We have quite service-based legislation still. But yeah, there was one small part, one small point that said, well, if this and this and this service doesn't fit, there can be some other thing. And that was the thing that we started. Oh, well, it's not actually mentioned, but there it says you can do some other thing or something else if anything doesn't fit. So we sticking to that. That was the starting point. We had it was a very crucial that we the first year of the project we gathered an expert group by various stakeholders from the state, from the ministry, from NGOs, and very strongly with people with disabilities, and also families. So bringing people together was the first crucial point. We were making few bigger conferences and many local seminars, conferences about the issue, and bringing people from England to share their experiences, bringing families to tell their experiences. That was very crucial. And I remember when we had the first national conference on the issue, year 2010, in the end I asked the audience, well, now that we have all listened and tried to learn these things today, how many people think that this could be possible in Finland? Please raise your hand, thumb up or down. And maybe half of the audience had maybe, and that was the starting point. Okay, so next slide, please. We were lucky to to then gather a few keen joint municipal districts who were responsible for organizing services for people with disabilities to first trials. And during the first, then the following 3 years, we basically had 20 people with intellectual and or physical disabilities, also with very high support needs, autism, to try it out with us. And we had 40 members of staff in the disability sector in all levels. That was very crucial, that we sat on the same table in all levels. So of course much effort was were put in creating common understanding about self-directed sport. It was a difficult thing to understand for many persons in all levels. It's quite easy to understand the point in some seminar, but then when you start actually working about the issue, there will be, and there still is, I suppose, many things to think about. Crucial was that we had peer groups for people with disabilities. That was helpful. We also had individual support in planning everything, since it was one of the first learnings that it's difficult to plan your life if you haven't been used to do that. Very practical. Families were involved. It was a strong thing for many families to think a bit differently and try to shift power, which we spoke a lot, shifting power to people with disabilities themselves. It was a strong thing, and many interesting conversations. Also political leaders involved in many levels, also the very high level. Next slide, please. We thought, well, what would be the Finnish context, and I won't go into detail, but we pretty much looked how the thing is done in England by you guys, and thought, okay, how would it work? And we had this little procedure of doing things. If knowing now, I don't know if every step is necessary, but this was the starting point. But the main goal really was to create more flexible solutions for people with disabilities, more individual solutions, and not only these services. So this was very well understood. So next slide, please. Then we had quite successful first trials. Some of the persons moved home from residential care, group housing, to independent living, and created their own circles of support with the actual personal budget. Quite many actually wanted to have something more to their daily lives, to be more inclusive in society, to do real work instead of sitting in day centers. To have more things to do, to be more inclusive in society. That was the main point, I suppose. And I think we're hearing one of the examples today, so I won't go further from this. Petri can put this next slide. Well, some difficult parts. As I mentioned before, many people didn't know, and I suppose it's difficult for everybody, even myself many times, what's possible, what options are there. Actually even the service system was for the families was quite unclear in many things. As we know, the main driver of service organizers being municipalities, which many of them are struggling with financial difficulties. The main driver for them is to keep the costs bit down. Uh, the, in many occasions, families didn't even know what they should be obliged to, or what the family member should be obliged to, or as a family, even though we have decent services. Some people didn't have many persons in the social circle, so when we tried to create a community connecting, we had to think creative in many occasions. One of the difficult part was that our social workers, at least in bigger cities, have very many clients, very many service users, people with disabilities. So they didn't have really, which is strange, they didn't really have a stretch link even to persons themselves, even though they were social workers. So much of the planning were done in people's own social circle, but still many didn't have it. Many didn't have much than their family. So we had to make sure that there was support available for people to plan, to make decisions, to organize support, and ensure the coverage and quality of services and things. And that was one of the crucial points, that if the social worker has 100 persons with disabilities by herself or himself, it's a bit much, to be honest. Of course, the difficult thing is this resource allocation and figuring out the price tag of services when the prices are kept quite low. So that was, and I suppose still is, difficult part. We started from a very simple model, just trying to measure the amount of public or private services that the person should be obliged to, and then transform that to something else maybe. There still isn't any clear juridical aspects, or there is any law about this issue still going on in Finland. Petteri and folks have been continuing the political lobbying process, but as I understood, there still isn't any clear entitlement of personal budget. It's always coming, but still not yet. It's strange that there always have to be pilots after pilots after pilots, and as I've understood, many of the results are quite the same actually as we had, since we had a own researcher in the project. We had quite a big effort on research and emphasis put on these aspects. So that was some difficult parts. Maybe the last slide, I have a short presentation. So some great points. It was possible to start, and Finns being quite practical. I suppose the only way for us to start it was, and I think still is, with these kind of pilots. We somehow stick in legislation very much, and you can't change everything by this. So the only option was to start from very small and creating more common understanding. Great points. People got and have gotten more and more individual solutions and support. Still not much, and it somehow struck me that now that we had this COVID crisis, all we spoke about was shut down all the day services, all the day centers, and then everything was shut down, and then people were sitting home, and there wasn't any. I didn't see any individual solutions for example, individual daytime solutions. Everything was just shut down. So still much work to be done with this. There was much empowerment going on with families, with people with disabilities. Many learned many new things from services even. Somehow strange point, but it was many times said by social workers themselves and case managers themselves, realizing the importance of the voice of a person, and moving towards real companionship and personalization, as many actually said. It's actually a thing that is crucial in social work, so it's strange that it was a big thing. For many, it's a circle of positive change. All the municipalities and the authorities we work with continued the process after the little project. So it's been going on and on, and it's very good. And I suppose some great points for good service providers have to be quite flexible to work this way. So that's one good point. I think I have just little time, and this was my little presentation. Thank you.